Welcome, everyone. I want to make a special welcome to all Case Western Reserve University alumni and friends who are attending this reunion homecoming event, with a special spotlight on the role of PhD alumni and their opportunities at the School of Medicine. Our reunion co-chairs, I want to extend my thanks to Dr. Janet Cross and Dr. David Skadden. Welcome as well. So my job is to introduce Dean Gerson and moderate a panel at the end today. It has been an uncertain time for all of us in 2020 with the COVID, and no less at the School of Medicine, with a stepping down of a long-serving dean, stepping down of a long-serving president. We have a new interim president, Scott Cowan, and we have, fortunately, Dean Gerson as the dean on an interim basis, bringing excellence, stability, and vision to the School of Medicine. Dr. Gerson, welcome and thank you for opening our session today.
Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining us. This is a little out of the usual, out of the common, if you will, for an initial alumni event. And thank you all for joining us for your individual class reunions. As we have all learned in this Zoom lifestyle, that we're not getting together quite in person as much as we want. I, in fact, had a recent experience of a colleague who actually developed COVID infection. And I had to ask myself, when was the last time I was in the room with that person? Because I see them every day. And I thought maybe it was yesterday, but I haven't actually been in close contact for 4 months. So I'm sure you've had that experience as well. I'd like to acknowledge, as Mark did, Janet Cross, class of 2000, which I guess is their 20th reunion, and David Skadden, class of 1980, I guess it's his 40th reunion, as co-chairs this year. Janet Cross, whom you'll actually hear from later, is leading engagement efforts with our medical alumni board. And the sometimes hard to connect PhD faculty alums who we'd like to be more involved with us, and this is a perfect occasion for that. David, we know well as an active member of our Council to Advance Human Health. He and I have known each other for many decades, as it turns out, serve and interact with each other throughout the year, and have the same interest in our research efforts. And I noticed that he, as a member of the Council to Advance Human Health, is actually serving as one of the catalysts for tonight's event. And I should also point out that he has been very active in our the Dean's visiting committee. So they're asking you, delighted that you joined us this evening under these conditions. We are making a lot of effort in the school. One of the opportunities that I see is to further the cause, such as you'll hear tonight, of taking our best basic scientists, their best basic science discoveries, and turn them into therapeutic realities. And the effort to do so is incredibly complex, and it's been led by 3 of the speakers that you'll hear from tonight, and it's a full-time job of yet another. So we are, in fact, dedicated to taking those breakthroughs through to their special application. We sometimes think of this as a way to patent our ideas, gain funding for them, launch them into startup companies. But the goal here is to take discoveries and help people. That's why we're physicians. That's where we're medical investigators. So it's really the avenue to accomplish that happens through entrepreneurship, the conversion, if you will, between basic clinical research and corporate America. The best of biotechnology happens through NIH funding, leading to commercialization strategies. And that's what we've observed with the Council to Advance Human Health, because we have many partners amongst our alum who are experts in that translational effort. We're dedicated to positioning our researchers to make outstanding contributions to move that medicine forward. make sure the proof of concept goes. And we're actually now starting to train them in biotech space, in the venture cap space, in patent law space. David and I have discussed our new master's program in regenerative medicine and entrepreneurship as an example of how to move that forward. But to do it, you really need a leader. And Mark Chance has been that leader for our organization, and he's helped pick up and promote the careers of our young, outstanding investigators. It takes more than just the principal investigator, however. It takes a team from graduate students to postdocs who are also training in the entrepreneurship space. And now I'd like to introduce Bill Sanford, who has vision like no one else in Cleveland. He has been dedicated to supporting our translational efforts here at Case Western and many other places as well. And I want to thank him for his many years of service as a trustee of Case Western Reserve University. He was one of the initial investors in Convelo. He saw it before anybody else did. He listened to the scientists, realized that they were onto something, and helped it grow. And I know that he wasn't an easy sell. So he'll tell you what it took to advance this process forward. Bill, for those of you who know, helped launch and oversee and grow Steris, which is a sterilization medical company located here in Cleveland. He brought Steris out of its wood pile from a little small startup into a global enterprise, and it's now incredibly flourishing because of the need to sterilize in this era of COVID. Bill has been successful as one of the founders for BioEnterprise, a collection that helps our institutions bring biotech forward, and of the Northeast Ohio Technology Coalition, or NORTEC, which assists in the growth of our local technology companies across many disciplines well beyond biotech. And these experiences have made Bill a real champion of the idea of commercialization in bioscience and a realist in understanding the complexity of doing so. He connects us to angel investors, to venture capitalist investors. He knows how to strike up a deal and a conversation. And I hope that you're all inspired by what you hear from him today, and you'll consider taking an active role with us in this most exciting area for us to develop throughout the School of Medicine. So without further ado, I'll turn things over to Bill Sanford. Hi, Bill.
Well, thank you, Dean Gerson. Although this isn't about me, this is about someone much more important than I am at this point in time, and that's Dr. Paul Tesar, and I had the great pleasure to introduce him today for this event. And quite appropriately, I became familiar with Paul, met him at a Case Western Reserve University event in Naples, Florida, a few years ago. And as many of you know, in January and February, people migrate to Naples, and you can see Case Western people all over the place down here, both raising money and talking about the great things that are happening in Cleveland, Ohio. But since I've known Paul just a few years, he has not only become a business colleague through our Convelo relationship, which I'll talk about in a little bit, but he's become a good friend. I think many of you today know of Paul, if you don't know him specifically, particularly those of you who have been involved with the School of Medicine, because he is a really famous guy. He's a world-renowned researcher. He is a tenured professor in the Department of Genetics and Genome Sciences at Case Western, but his interrelationship with Case goes back to his undergraduate days, where he earned his BS in biology magna cum laude, so he's obviously a smart guy. And he took that on to a very famous place, Oxford in England, where he earned his PhD. If you had the opportunity to look at his CV, it's many pages of reading, because there are scores and scores of publications, scientific awards, invited lectures. He has several patents. He's just a great guy, but he is also the co-founder of Convelo Therapeutics. What you may not know about Paul, which I think is almost as important as his academic and scientific achievements, he grew up in Lake County, Ohio. He's a local kid. He went to Lake Catholic Hospital, not hospital, Lake Catholic High School, and played football and other sports. Just a regular guy. At Case Western, he ran track. He's a sports nut. He loves the Browns, the Cavs, the Indians, and the Buckeyes. But he then went away for his education at Oxford, his PhD. When he finished, he was deciding what to do, and with some encouragement from a number of people, including Barbara Snyder, Pam Davis, Ron Richard of the Cleveland Foundation, and many, many others, especially from his mother, Linda, who lives in Lake County. He came back to Cleveland, and it's been Cleveland's gain to have him involved. As I mentioned, my involvement with Paul has been primarily as a supporter of Convelo, but during that period of time, I've had the good fortune to observe his outstanding collaboration abilities to deal with all types of individuals and backgrounds. Certainly scientists, but he's really effective in talking with investors. He's a great role model for employees. He does so much for the community. He was recently named to the 40 under 40 Cranes business group because of his achievements. But he is truly a fast learner. The Convelo effort is a great story because there was this fabulous science that Paul had worked on for years and years. He and one of his friends at Case Western Reserve University, Drew Adams, are both in the Department of Genetics, but they have very different but complementary backgrounds. Paul is primarily a biologist and Drew is primarily a chemist. And those two individuals came together to work on a situation that was identified as being very important. And that is a clinical need for a cure for MS, along with other neurodegenerative diseases and conditions. So with that in mind, they formed a company, Convelo Therapeutics, which has done remarkable work in a very short period of time. The company was formed in late 2016. Some financing was put together in mid-2017, which is when I became involved. We did a very small round of financing, a few $100,000, but it was seed money to go to a larger financing that was put together with a group of primarily Cleveland investors. And I want to make one point very, very strongly. When we were approaching potential investors for Convelo, they all had the same response, which was, I don't do biopharma deals because it takes too long and I will be dead before they pay off. Maybe my grandkids could benefit financially, but I will not. And we put together a program that indicated that such was not the case. There were milestone events that could occur. So without going through that, I know Paul's going to be talking about it in a few minutes, but we just want everyone to know that there are investment opportunities from inventions at Case that can be financed locally, can grow locally, and create other opportunities and be inspirational for other inventors who want to do things, again, locally. So I would like to close by introducing the hometown hero, my good friend, a role model, Paul Tesar.
Well, thanks so much, Bill. That was an extremely and overly generous introduction. I'm forever indebted to you for your guidance, for your leadership, and of course for your friendship. The first time we met, as you mentioned, was in 2016 at an event sort of similar to today's, other than that event was in person and there was good wine and food, and we weren't on Zoom. But nonetheless, it was at that event that you asked me the question, why aren't you doing this in Cleveland? And I didn't have an answer, and you said, call me if you'd like, and we can talk about it. And that was really the first time that we had thought about doing this locally and not in Boston or San Francisco. And it was, through our continued engagement and friendship and connection with the rest of the local investment team that we were able to launch Convelo here in Cleveland and keep it here in Cleveland. So thank you for all that you've done and for all that you will continue, all you're continuing to do. So also like to thank Stan and Mark for the opportunity to present at this reunion event. What I'd like to do over the next 15 minutes is really just give all of you, my fellow Case Western Reserve University alumni and friends, really a glimpse into what my laboratory has been doing over the last 10 years since I moved back home to Cleveland. And really what I hope you'll take away is that both the past and the present School of Medicine leadership have really been visionary to really put an infrastructure in place to better enable entrepreneurship as well as the advancement of scientific breakthroughs towards patients. I also hope you'll appreciate the thriving science and innovation that is ongoing here in the medical school, and the successes that I will show you from my lab are just one example of all of the excitement that's bubbling up around us. And so I'm going to switch over to slides now and share my screen. All right, so I thought I would start just by giving you a sort of a simple summary of the School of Medicine mission, sort of as I see it here, and give you a sense of how my laboratory is really contributing to that mission. Of course, the main goal of our medical school is to train future leaders of science and medicine. We also endeavor to create impactful scientific breakthroughs. And of course, to expand that mission, we really want to be able to deliver new medicines to patients around the world. And so within my lab, we really take training very seriously. And it's something that is that I'm really passionate about and that I take very seriously. And so I've had the pleasure and the privilege to work with a large number of individuals over the past 10 years since I started my laboratory. Here's a montage of those folks on this slide. So whether they're undergraduates, graduate students, postdocs, technicians, staff scientists, I've really been blessed to be surrounded by talent, and I consider this group a really close family. And so 43 folks, 22 women, 21 men, and I'm really looking forward to seeing all the wonderful things that they do in the future. Of course, as running a scientific research lab, our biggest contribution, of course, is new and impactful and innovative science. We've over the past 10 years brought in around $20 million to support our research efforts from government sources, foundations, and through generous philanthropy, including likely some of you who are attending this event today. And so obviously very grateful and indebted to those who have supported our efforts to create these impactful scientific breakthroughs. And so we've contributed about 72 pieces of data or papers to the scientific literature, just showing you a montage of some of the journal covers here. We've been very fortunate that these have had a high translational potential, and so we've had a lot of coverage in the mainstream media, including BBC and NPR and USA Today, among many others. And the last piece here is really delivering new medicines to the world. And this is something that I think in general, in many scientific enterprises is where it stops, because as scientists, we're trained to create new discoveries, and that's what we love to do. And we love to go back to the next discovery and the next discovery and the next discovery. But it really takes a different skill set, a different infrastructure, a different culture to want to push those forward into patients, and often that's through an intermediate biotech startup. And so I'll tell you a story today about the foundational science around Convelo Therapeutics, which is now partnered with Genentech. So I'll start here just giving you a quick sense of what my lab works on. We think of the brain, these 100 billion nerve cells that are the wires that are required to transmit electrical signals throughout our nervous system. You can think about them here. But in my lab, we don't work on the nerve cell or the wire itself. We work on this protective covering, this protective coating around the nerve cell. And this is called myelin. Right? So myelin is this protective and insulating coating around these nerve cells. It's absolutely required for the essential for the transmission of these electrical information along our nerve cells, and all of our daily activities, whether it be walking, talking, eating, learning, they all require myelin. And so given its important role, loss or dysfunction of this myelin, as you can imagine, can be quite catastrophic. And so the loss of myelin or the myelinating cells in our central nervous system is the underlying cause of a variety of disorders, and multiple sclerosis being the most well-known, where the immune system attacks and destroys these myelin-producing cells. But there are a number of other disorders where myelin is dysfunctional or lost. These include these rare but very severe and fatal class of disorders called leukodystrophies, where children have genetic mutations that cause the myelin not to function properly from birth. I'll talk a little bit about one of these here in a few minutes. But also even some of the mental health conditions like autism and schizophrenia, trauma conditions like traumatic brain injury, low oxygen at birth, or toxins, and even age-related dementia and Alzheimer's. There's clear evidence where there's lack or dysfunction or loss of myelin. And really what we lack is the ability to replace or regenerate that myelin or those myelinating cells. And this is really the foundational focus of my laboratory, is to understand what goes wrong in these myelin disorders and to generate new therapeutic approaches that can regenerate or replace that myelin and potentially restore function to patients. And so we do this sort of in three buckets in my laboratory that you'll see here on the left. We are a stem cell laboratory, so we use stem cell tools to allow us to gain access to cell types in the nervous system that are really challenging to study. Right? And so here I'm just showing you one example where we've really been able to grow. Here you can see these cells here in the bottom of a Petri dish. I'll show you a video here in a second. We've really been able to grow these cells. These are stem cells that are normally found in the brain. And we were able to grow them in really large numbers in the laboratory. And this provided us the ability to be able to test if we could identify new potential medicines that could force these cells to generate new myelinating cells. And so I'll turn on this video here, and you'll be able to see that by adding a potential therapeutic to these stem cells in a Petri dish, we're able to coax them rapidly to form these very beautiful, what are called oligodendrocytes. So these are the cells in your brain that produce myelin, and these are the cells that our ultimate goal is to regenerate. And so we really had this capacity to have a screening platform where we could identify potential medicines that could stimulate the regeneration of these myelin-producing cells. Right? But as Bill mentioned earlier, I'm a biologist, and so advancing forward new medicines is sort of a daunting task. And so it was really through the leadership at the School of Medicine to put the infrastructure in place and to recruit this gentleman here, who's one of my closest colleagues and closest friends, Drew Adams. And so Drew came from the Broad Institute of Harvard and MIT. He's a chemist, a Harvard-trained chemist and chemical biologist, and his lab is right next door to mine now in the genetics department. And so in 2015, when he arrived, really the unification of this chemistry and biology really allowed us to push forward and identify potential medicines to stimulate regeneration and remyelination in patients. And we collaboratively worked on a number of studies that in the end identified promising drug-like compounds that could regenerate myelin, reduce disease severity, and reverse paralysis in animal models of multiple sclerosis. And what this means effectively is that mice who were paralyzed by their MS-like disease regained the ability to walk. And so this was really exciting to us. We had what we felt were really the three cornerstone pieces to push this forward. And it was, through a number of conversations with the CAW committee that Mark and Stan referred to earlier, through discussions with chief translation officers in the School of Medicine, through tech transfer office, really that we had the foundational pieces in place to push this forward. We had this discovery platform, this ability to screen and test for molecules that stimulate regeneration. We had understood what these molecules were binding to in the cells and what the mechanism was for how they were stimulating remyelination. And we had some early stage chemical matter, some early stage compounds that had really good properties to push forward. And so, as Bill mentioned, that really led us to spin out a company from Case Western Reserve University School of Medicine called Convelo Therapeutics. Convelo is the Latin word for to wrap around, and so the ultimate goal of Convelo is to stimulate the regeneration of these myelinating cells to wrap around nerve cells and restore function to patients. And so we founded this company in 2016. We, at Bill and Ron Richards' really advice and assistance and just leadership, we kept this company here in Cleveland. We licensed an IP portfolio from the university, and we raised an initial seed round and then almost $8 million Series A from a group of Cleveland-centric investors. So this is not a professional VC type group. This was a group of Clevelanders who came together to really take a risk, but to support the biotech infrastructure, university, and ultimately to help patients. Excitingly, in 2019, the impact of the science was recognized, and we partnered with Genentech in a large collaboration agreement and an option to acquire agreement. And so we're now pushing forward with advancing our molecules into the clinic. I think excitingly for Cleveland and for local infrastructure here is in 2017, we had 1 employee, and now in 2020, we have 17 employees. And you're going to hear from employee 1 just after me, Brad Lang. So we had a separate structure here, which was that we had our R&D operations here in Cleveland, but our C-suite, our executives were embedded within the biotech infrastructure in Boston and San Francisco. And Convelo is run by our CEO, Derek Rossi, who many of you may know was the founder of Moderna, a company that's probably well known to everyone right now in the COVID era. But Derek is Convelo's CEO. It's done a terrific job of navigating the path for our company. And so I just wanted to really to highlight here that this requires different skills at every step of the way, but it also requires different streams of funding, right? And so we were benefited from startup funds from the university, and also foundational funds and government funds. But it was really philanthropy that made a difference for us at the early stages, to take a risk, to invest in early stage discovery, high risk projects that have really put us in a place where we are today. And of course, a different set of individuals who took a different risk to invest in Convelo and bringing it forward. And so I'll just end with two quick slides here, just to give you a sense of that's not the end of the story. We often tell the Convelo story, and it seems like it has a nice happy ending. And of course, the real happy ending will when we have an impact on patients. But just to give you a sense that the work that we're doing in the laboratory is a continuous pipeline of understanding myelin disease and developing new therapeutics for those disorders. And so we continue to innovate in the stem cell tools space. This is just one example here that I'm showing you. We've developed the ability to grow. You can see these little pieces of white tissue. These are small pieces of human brain tissue in the laboratory that we can grow here in 3 dimensions. We can grow these at scale. We can grow these from any human individual, and it allows us to study patients' own myelinating cells right here in a petri dish, but more importantly, provides a more relevant platform to test potential therapies. I think the final example here is just to say, here's another myelin disease that we're working on. We're working on a lot of them. We've really put a lot of effort into defining the mechanisms that are causative for this disease. And excitingly, in Nature, one of the top scientific journals here, just a few months ago, we published a paper. We identified a therapeutic for this disorder, very separate from what we were doing with Convelo. This is called an ASO, or an antisense oligonucleotide therapeutic. But most strikingly, in this particular disease, mice with this disease that normally only survive a few weeks now live a full lifespan. So quite remarkable. We collaborated with Ionis Pharmaceuticals on this, and we're really excited to see this push forward into the clinic. And so, I'll just end here really by saying that, we think that we have a discovery engine. We think that we can continue to apply the expertise and the technologies that we have to continue to innovate and develop new therapeutics for patients using our stem cell tools, understanding cause of disease, developing new medicines. And so, I think the final message here is really, I think our success has been driven by the collective contributions of the entire Case Western Reserve University community, whether it's the generous philanthropists supporting high-risk studies, or the School of Medicine leadership purposefully supporting a culture of entrepreneurship, or alumni and friends who are offering contacts and connections, or investors putting time and money into a startup company to get it off the ground. And collectively, we really make this CWRU community, and collectively, we are definitely better than the sum of our parts. And so thanks to all of you for the opportunity to share the story. Certainly happy to take questions during the panel discussion, or please feel free to reach out to me directly. And so now what I'm going to do is turn things over to our next speaker, Brad Lang. It's always a treat to introduce a close colleague and friend. I know Brad's going to walk you through his own background, but I really want to share a few things from my own perspective. Brad is truly a star in the Cleveland biotech community. He's one of the cornerstones of Convelo's success. So I first met Brad right when I started my faculty position. And so he was in Jerry Silver's lab, and he asked me to be on his thesis committee. And he may or may not know this, but he was the first student to ask me to be on their thesis committee. And as a new assistant professor who has no idea what they're doing at their job, this was pretty cool and exciting. And so our paths would cross, about 7 years later, and the tables were turned when I actually got to ask him to be Convelo's first employee. So Brad's a shining example of how the science and people of our medical school are impacting biotech here in Cleveland and abroad. So Brad, the virtual floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Paul, for that incredibly generous introduction, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today in general. It will be a challenge to follow both the chair of my board and the founder of the company, but I will do my best to provide some insider perspective over the next couple minutes. Next slide, please. A little bit about me. Paul just mentioned, I received my PhD from Case in 2015, where I worked in the neuroscience lab with Jerry Silver. This is apparently the only picture I have of that day, but as Paul mentioned, he was on my committee and can vouch for me. In Jerry's lab, we investigated approaches to promote repair of neural injuries, specifically spinal cord injury, which after an absolute ton of work led to me to invent or discover a drug we called intracellular sigma peptide. And if you can go to the next slide, why that's important is, well, one small tidbit from my academic career that I'm rather proud of is the overall lack of replication is basically every scientist's greatest fear. But since our publication, the compound we discovered has become both the positive control for both its target and now used as a positive control for nerve regeneration. Our results have been replicated in some way by, I think, 2 to 3 dozen laboratories across the world at this time. Following graduation, I organized a small group of investors and strategics to form a startup called NerveGen and licensed this technology. This incredible amount of work is now paying off as NerveGen is slated for clinical trials, I believe, next month with the compound we discovered. Next slide, please. While organizing NerveGen, as Paul mentioned, we kept in touch. He was on my thesis committee, and he had many exciting discoveries coming out of his lab, an entire pipeline. In 2017, I joined him as employee 1 as VP of research, and in 3 years, we have grown the team from just me to now 17 employees. We built a full and independent drug discovery R&D engine and partnered with Genentech to translate these discoveries into medicine. And we will grow to 18 next Friday with another employee joining. Next slide. Now, Case Western Reserve has played a larger than life role in the success of our company. Not even mentioning Paul and Drew and their discoveries, over half of our team are Case Western Reserve University PhD or master graduates. Some hired directly out of their PhD, like Dan Factor and Dan McHugh from the genetics department. Some came from us after spending time at a local institution. Myself, I was at Athersys. Samantha Stubblefield was at the Harrington Discovery Institute, and Rob Mecklenburg was at Thermal and Diabetes. In addition, we have recruited some PhD graduates after finishing successful postdocs in Canada with Andrew Capriello and Julie Savage on the bottom. Next slide, please. Now, here are a few takeaways from the overall Convelo experience. First, I really believe that drug discovery is achievable in Cleveland. It's not just something that happens on the coast. We built a company around a Case Western discovery, raised capital from local investors, and recruited a team of Northeast Ohio talent. Second, mentoring. From the start, the Convelo leadership has put enormous amounts of effort into training the next generation of leaders and entrepreneurs. We have been mentored by Bill Sanford, Ron Richard of the Cleveland Foundation, Blaine Walter, and so many more on how to run a successful business, and this will pay long-term dividends. And finally, this Convelo experience is not a one-off. Convelo is a success story that will ultimately expand the base of our ecosystem's pyramid. The entire model of starting a company around a Cleveland idea located in Cleveland with Cleveland talent can and should be replicated here. So that is my experience at Convelo. It's been over 3 years now, and I'm just excited to see what the next chapter brings. And with that, I'll turn it, I think, over to Mark Chance.
Thank you, Brad. Great presentation. So let me show a couple more slides, and then I think we'll get to our panel. And also there was a question that came from the chat that I think we could help with. Let's talk about, Paul showed that line from discovery to patients. Let's just take a minute to break it down and how those of us in the medical school are helping to manage the ecosystem are monitoring things at particular stages and tracking our progress, which is very good. So we start with early observations. Those, and I'll show this for Convelo in a second. Early observations in the PI labs. We use translational officers, industry scouts, consultants who work for me to help the PIs confirm those observations. And that discovery stew is $350 million a year of biomedical research in the city. So it's a tremendous source of novel ideas. But not every observation gets confirmed, but those that we can, we invest with the CA and Coulter and the other translational research programs and manage through the Office of Translation and Innovation. We maybe look at 100 things and fund 30 projects and spend a couple $1 million moving those confirmed observations to a defined product or technology that has business value that can be quantified. Along the way, we work with tech transfer to patent and then market and try to move to a license or a startup. And the university is starting close to between 5 and 10 biomedical science companies a year. And as Bill Sanford pointed out, as those startups progress, payments can come back to investors in the university well before any product is even approved, much less marketed for sale. Next slide, please. So this is how that map looks for Convelo. Paul created some observations around oligodendrocytes, optimized the technology. Ka invested. And what's Ka? Let's stop for a second. It's you. It's you. It is our PhD alums who I went to, industry experts, to tell me if this is good. So we have proposed enhancements to the ecosystem, translational fellows who would be in PhDs, trainees, or postdocs in a laboratory who get protected time to move their technology forward. Entrepreneurs in residence who are consultants who can provide a business plan for a technology, attract capital, and move us to a startup. Virtualized accelerator concept where we provide support to business formation. And then on the capital side, seed funds to start enterprises and to move them forward. And the workforce is being provided by the medical school, both PhDs, master's students, MDs, fellows, residents. The entire ecosystem is clamoring to get in line to help move things to patients. Thank you. Slides done. Let's go to our panel. So thank you all our presenters today. I'd like to start with a question to Brad and Bill both. And what are we doing the right things? What can we do to make it attractive for Brad, for you to do your next gig here in town? And Bill, how do we overcome that hesitancy of investors who don't understand, perhaps haven't been educated that the returns can be good and the risk can be managed and the returns can be in this lifetime?
Thank you, Mark. Really, I wish there was the opportunities that the university has for graduate students available to me when I was in graduate school. The programs like the Case Western Venture Mentoring Program, even the Council to Advance Human Health were just in their infancy when I was finishing up my PhD. And it's great to see the university go in this route. For next companies, next ideas, I think we need to invest in that base of discovery, expand the base of the pyramid and let things grow from there. With the research coming out of Case Western and Drew and Paul's lab. In addition to just fostering the spirit of entrepreneurship within the university with meetings like this and the stuff coming out of Ann DeShant's group.
Bill, how about the investors? How do we get the message out? And what are there networks of alumni around the country that are investing in academic innovation?
Well, the first question is, we need to have more examples. So it's a cause and effect. The more examples we get, the easier it is to raise money. But Convelo is just a tremendous role model. I use that term in my introduction to Paul. And not only is he a role model, and Brad and Drew and the others, but the company is, because it shows that things can, in fact, be done with, and I will say local only because it's Cleveland, but it's local support of the things that are being invented at Case Western Reserve University. We have already had, we are restricted from talking specifically about what the event contributed from a return standpoint, but the investors in Convelo Therapeutics through Cleveland Convelo Holdings, LLC, have already been significant. And the investors still own the stock in the company. So it really was a financing model that has proved to be extraordinarily productive and could be replicated quite easily. But I think the emotion of, on one hand, helping the university, helping the community, doing something for humanity in the form of better therapeutics and cures, not just therapeutics, because hopefully Convelo will be a cure for MS, not just a therapy. That has intrinsic value, but the financial aspect now can be fully demonstrated. So I'll just shut up here for a minute and think of some other comments.
Dr. Gerson, you know, you've seen the development of the Cleveland ecosystem. You've been an early advocate for innovation and inventor yourself. Is this our moment? Is Bill right? Do we need success to get success? And should we just be patient and keep moving forward?
I don't think we've figured out the real answer to Bill's concerns with his investor colleagues in the venture world, that it takes a long time. And so Bill's strategy of building success points that allows you to evolve both commitments, financing, et cetera, so that people don't have to get to the point of a phase 3 trial and FDA approval is an incredibly important advancement to obviate the need to wait 15 years. So I think having those points along the way are actually really critical. And I think we need to help in that role model way that Bill discussed, sort through better approaches so that we gather interest, because the home run strategy of what we're talking about here is so overwhelmingly greater in its impact at the end of the day than all of those other technologies and devices and diagnostics, that it's worth the time and effort.
Paul, what's the next big thing? What are we all going to want to invest in your second round of success?
I mean, I highlighted a couple of diseases that, you know, the lab is putting a lot of effort into. We have a lot of excitement on, you know, what could be, you know, Convelo 2.0, you know, coming out in the future. But our entire focus right now is getting this across the finish line and getting into patients. I think there's two challenges. Not challenges, but I think two things that we need to think about. One is, Brad mentioned this, I think really astutely, which is making sure that we support the early stage discovery science in Cleveland, because we're never going to be able, if we build this infrastructure of investors and we still need to, you know, do this and buildings and incubators, and we bring in the executive talent for all these companies. If we don't have a strong scientific base here locally to translate, then I think we're missing the point. So it's built on the discovery science, and we need to continue to do that. And a lot of that is through philanthropic investment, early stage, high risk projects that have the potential to make a huge impact, as Stan just alluded to. You know, I think the other thing to think about is the workforce. And you know, Convelo has, as we said, we've grown our space. If we needed to hire 100 people, or there were 4 Convelos simultaneously, I think we might have, you know, we could bring people in from the outside, which we have, but I think we'd have a hard time filling that space. And so there's the master's program regenerative medicine that Stan has spearheaded, and others provide us an opportunity to fill that workforce, but also we need to fill the executive talent. And so it's the folks like Brad and others who are now at Convelo who will lead the next generation of these companies in Cleveland, and we got to figure out how to support and find ways to keep them here.
Stan, what would you say to people on this this call, this live stream? What should they do? What should they be thinking about?
Well, anyone with an interest in this space has to think about where they see the advance, how they can get excited about a particular advance. What are the unmet needs? Every one of us with an interest in science has an issue that they see as paramount in our medical day-to-day interactions. And we can all define that passion for, I wish there were a treatment for, or I wish there was a diagnosis for. So find that passion and then think about being engaged. And one can be engaged in many different ways. The workforce piece, the development phase piece, the advocacy piece, the resources piece, the training and education piece. So there's many, many different ways. It takes an army of individuals, more than by far than a village. And all of us know that the creative amongst us, Paul, Brad, Drew, rely on many, many colleagues to get it done both here and nationally. And I think the magic of creating the effort around our university is something that's really an opportunity for us to pursue.
I would agree with that. And I would also say, to Paul, let me share some of the statistics. And I think it's the good news and the bad news. If we look back to 2017, there are over 25 companies that the university has launched in the biomedical space. They, as a group, they have raised a considerable amount of money. I'm not allowed to say how much it is, but I can say on average, they're raising $5 million in their first 3 years. So on average, they're getting to an A round, no problem. And we can find investors, we can find executives, investors. Michael Haig can license things on very good terms for the university, but most of that money is coming from Seattle, New York, Boston, San Francisco, et cetera. And so the companies are mostly being started there. And 10 to 15% of the activity we're attracting to Cleveland. So the ability to do a double or a triple is totally there from the standpoint of feasibility of the technologies. And your point about having the workforce to manage that, and then Bill's point to having the investor capital to make it happen in town are, hypotheses we have to solve for the ecosystem, questions we have to solve. But I am excited that your technologies, with the help of all of us, can attract that capital. There's no question that they're at the highest level nationally of quality. You do $1 of research in Cleveland, you commercialize as well as anybody in the United States. And I'm very proud of that. Now, we don't return as much to Cleveland as other areas return. And that is, I think, some of the issue. And that's one of the facts I think we wanted to bring to all of you on this call today, make you aware and proud, and know that we're toiling hard and we're making progress. And many of those companies have products that are already on the market treating patients today. And Stan's point that that's the end goal, I really want to reemphasize. Stan, would you like to give any final comments for our panel today?
Stan, before you do that, may I make a comment?
Please, Bill.
Please.
I think that the Convelo model can actually be replicated and keep the startup in Cleveland, controlled by Cleveland, and utilize resources from other parts of the country as needed to assist. Paul mentioned our CEOs in Boston, and our chief business officer was in California. Those are hotbeds that know how to do these sorts of things. And our mentality in Cleveland should be that we can start great companies and take them to a point of financial success without waiting 10 or 15 years, as was already pointed out. But perhaps that's not even the objective we should think about at the beginning. The objective should be to finish the proof of concept, do the legwork, make ourselves very attractive, be the impetus for the big pharma and other people to take it from there and go on. There's another aspect of the Convelo deal that has not been mentioned, and that is there is a tail on the agreement, in the sense that if the partner does in fact acquire the company, the income to investors does not end there. There are other milestones after the fact that can result in some significant payoffs in the future. But we've already covered the money. we have more investment for new startups and can move forward. So anyway, I think there's an extraordinary opportunity for Cleveland.
So with that, some final comments. Your feedback's important to us. Feel free. Our email addresses are simple. First name, last name, the case hasn't changed. We'd love to know and how we can be involved. How can we learn from your own experiences and what you saw exciting from this presentation. So we hope a little bit of feedback from our alums would be a great idea. Your perspectives are perhaps even more important than ours. So thank you.
So I'd like to, without further ado, turn it over to Dr. Janet Cross and Dr. Skadden. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Mark. First of all, I'd like to just take a moment to thank our presenters tonight. They've certainly given us a lot to think about. It's really exciting to learn more about the efforts underway to instill an entrepreneurial spirit throughout the campus. It's particularly meaningful to me as a PhD alumna and the Associate Dean of a Biomedical Sciences graduate program at my current institution, because I know firsthand how vital it is to equip our students with skills beyond those that they acquire in their labs, as well as to prepare them for careers outside of academia. The individuals that we heard from this evening are, first of all, terrific role models for students who are interested in entrepreneurship. And importantly, the internship opportunities that we heard about this evening are fabulous and will be really critical for those exploring careers in biotech or industry. I'd also like to thank our audience for joining us this evening. As a reunion co-chair, I wish, of course, that we could be holding this event in person, but we've put together a great virtual weekend that we hope captures the spirit of reunion and homecoming. And I just want to take a moment to highlight a couple of things that are coming up. Our alumni award recipients will be recognized tomorrow evening at an event hosted by Dean Gerson. Saturday morning, we're hosting an event with nursing and dental called Successful Aging. And I know that you will all enjoy your class meetings where you can connect directly via Zoom with your classmates on Saturday night. I hope that you'll take advantage of all the weekend has to offer. I also hope if you're able that you'll consider joining us for some of the other events, including the Blue Block Party tonight, hosted by our new interim president, Scott Cowan. That starts at 7 o'clock. So thank you again for joining us today, and I hope that we may cross paths again sometime in the future, either throughout this reunion weekend or at some other point. Please have a wonderful evening.